Hello, welcome to the 66 playtest. Tonight we're playtesting 66 Lovecraft. We're having another crack at the it's the same as the other 66 kind of products in a basic way, but we have obviously different paths to explore and different archetypes to head towards. So I've got Chris, Jay, and Mark with me tonight. We have some kind of set ideas for what characters are going to be like, and I think I'll just start by just asking people, do you have any firm ideas for what kind of character you want to be playing?
Yeah, so I had a brief idea. I haven't finished statting him up really, so I was going to give some of the real kind of bottom rung of society, so migrant worker kind of things. In the kind of 27, still quite a lot of them wandering around the states. So we're going to have a crack with that. So trying to fill the muscle sort of role.
So kind of a nice strong character, maybe physically, maybe not so mentally.
So yes, mostly physical attributes, but there's some mental stuff there regarding kind of resourcefulness and that kind of thing.
Okay, Jay, you've pinged.
Yeah, I was basically playing around this idea previously, and I'm going to go for an investigative character in my case. In particular, I think, yeah, looking for if not the main character, she's easily going to be the female character, easily the sidekick of the character, but she's not the romantic lead. Everything in a noir kind of thing. She's the female character who's acted the voice of reason rather than the sultral, but the seductress and betrayer.
It's worth pointing out to people at this point, 66 Lovecraft is very much a warts and all kind of system. We're not glamorizing any elements of the 20s or you know, the eras of any of the books that Lovecraft is set in. So issues of gender and race will be not forced to the front, but they will exist within the playtest we're doing, the game that we're playing. Chris, did you have any ideas?
Yes, I was thinking of going the fringe scientist route, because I thought we're not sure we've really tried that yet. So I thought it'd be interesting to put together a good sort of scientific knowledge doctor type who can sort of take their side and take their part in the investigation.
So somebody a little bit more on the side of the weird and bizarre than the others.
Yeah, I'm thinking someone who's already seen the elephant. So yeah, definitely someone who's a bit odd.
Someone with the advantage seeing the elephant. Okay. Right. Well, this is actually the first playtest I've run in a while, and it is a character creation playtest tonight. We're not going to be actually playing the game tonight. We're generating characters that we're going to be using going forwards. So when we create characters in 66 Lovecraft, first of all we choose paths. Now there are kind of two ways of doing character creation. The first is we buy the paths of points, and we buy any advantages we want going from those points. The second way is a more kind of structured version where we have not necessarily a set number of paths, but a set number of advantages that are available. Does anyone have any votes on which method you want to use tonight?
I'm leaning much towards the freeform version where we just go with you've got a certain number of character points, pick your path and on you go, because I always prefer the freedom of that methodology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fine with me. I mean, I think we've only ever really done the kind of structured version before on the playtest, so that'll be quite interesting. So yeah, so basically, if you guys want to have a look over the path system, there is a link to the. Is there? Yes, Chris has put a link to the book up there, so we can have a look through that. Jay, you've chosen your paths already.
Yes. Yeah, I've had a chance to think about what I want to do for this character. I just came up with some basic ideas on what I wanted to, and then just started spamming. There's a website I use that generates fake people, and it came up with the name randomly of Aurora Valentine.
That's a
I
very
thought
good.
I have to create this character now. Now with a name like Aurora Valentine, I've got a pretty good idea what she wanted to. So I was thinking along the lines of the journalist idea, and we're just flicking through the past, thinking, well, what kind of other things strike out to me? And the two other parts that I quite like the look of are that of activist and student.
Okay, so it's activist, journalist, and student. So a journalism student, perhaps, very kind of interesting character for the period. You're going to be facing a lot of kind of different societal pressures, as well as obviously the pressures of running around fighting Lovecraftian monsters, or
Yeah, I
not.
was thinking on the lines of that her activism would be more on the lines of women's rights, but the nature of because she's a woman in the 20s, she's not going to be able to go to the best schools of journalism, or even if there are schools of journalism in this era. So an awful lot of her basically training as a student is through on-the-job and internships, which I perhaps might be if we do end up with a character who is a lead investigator, that
Mm.
might be an in, or she's basically hooked herself onto the detective or the private detective character, and that's how she joins the rest of the group.
That's quite interesting. It actually put me in mind of Lois Lane. Actually, I'm just trying to think when that character was introduced. I think it might have been a bit later in the 30s, but female journalists weren't entirely unheard of. Okay, have any of Chris or Mark, have you thought about your paths at all, or?
Yeah, I've got my path sort of targeted. I'm going to go down the fringe science route, so I thought the fringe science path would be a good starting point. Um, so I've gone for that path. I haven't really got a sort of shape for the character other than the path itself. So, in addition to fringe scientist, I've gone for doctor. So I'm sort of a medical doctor interested in fringe science. And my first thought for the third path was the wonderful titled Alienist path.
Oh yes, yes, the kind of psychologist characters, yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, when I looked at it, the path is very similar to the Doctor and the Fringe Scientist. There's a huge overlap, and while I could put together a character, it did seem a bit of a waste. So I thought, I want something different. I want something which might have a few practical adventure type skills in there. So I've gone for stage magician, and I'm thinking he's a town doctor, so he's sort of person who's everybody sort of knows. But he also he enjoys magic, and he does kids' parties and things like that. And it's sort of he's not a professional at it. He does it for fun. He does it to amuse the kids, and he's treating and things like that. But it also, of course, gives me access to advantages like sleight of hand and things like that. So I think that might come in useful, as well as maybe to giving him a few social skills, which might come in handy.
Well, there's another thing that could come in very useful there if your character genuinely enjoys kind of entertaining children, things like that. That is a quality which, under the rules that we're using for trauma and horror and things like that, could help you recover those lost those attained trauma points. So your character might, with a bit more of a nice job with friendly little kids that he likes spending time with, then he's probably not going to go mad as somebody who's sitting alone at home thinking about it all the time. It's thanks for mentioning that the alienist was too similar to the Doctor as well. I'll have a look at that, because that's one of the reasons we playtest, is keep things.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a problem. I think it's only a problem if you want to take both paths. So.
Since the psychologist alienist character is quite similar to a medical profession, it might be likely to come up again. So I will have a look. And Mark, have you had any thoughts yet?
Yeah, so one or two. I was looking through this lot for essentially a manual labourer, manual fighter kind of approach. Now, what I've got so far, if you're talking about migrant worker, I think actually hobo is probably actually the right term. It's migrant who's looking for work. So the drifter path works very well. Labourer, again works, and I kind of need the third, so I looked at Deviant with the definition of disregarding social constraints. So someone who doesn't live in the normal loop, in the normal cycles of life, he's outside of that, and thus I've given him I've given him those three.
Yes, Deviant's one a fun one because it's quick. Deviant's quite a fun one because it's applicable to a lot of different kind of aspects of life. For example, you might consider if your character was like Jay's an activist for certain rights, they might be a deviant. Or if they're somebody who is non-Christian, they might be a deviant. There's all kinds of ways of justifying that. So yeah, that sounds perfectly plausible. How you can do that. So yeah, any particular advantages people are taking off those passes? Anyone got a thing? I know Jay, you've pretty much got a full character already, haven't you?
James, hello.
Jay, you're muted, Jay.
Yes, it's because I've been typing, so I don't want to hear the clacky noises. Yeah, she's an interesting character in that of both activist and student, I'm mostly taking life cards.
Okay.
Because just putting together the idea of, because I imagine that Aurora is actually quite young, so taking the activist one, for example, things like history, people and places, and reputation and threaten aren't skills that she's going to be very good at, particularly she's only 5 foot tall and a woman. She's not going to be able to threaten people very effectively. And as she is essentially a student, her stock of blackmail and knowledge and reputation is going to be very light. So from the activist one, I've picked off brawn, courage, and self-confidence.
Yeah, I'm actually seeing it now because you sent me an email earlier. But yeah, that's quite interesting because it shows how your character within the 66 system, certainly you don't have to have a big tough character to actually have a build which is quite resistant to kind of damage. Obviously, in some games, in some settings, the tag words that you have on those advantages make a lot of difference. For example, things like body versus soul, and Lovecraft is one of those games because it has a lot of things which will attack the soul cards directly, or soul abilities directly, and some things which will attack body directly. But it's always good to have a nice solid character, a nice tough character.
Yeah, at the moment you've got just thinking life cards. The other life cards you picked up off student are ambitious, expressive, and wit.
Yeah.
So she's quite a tough little cookie in the fact she's got 6 life cards. So. Yeah. Just your thoughts on kill time for the others to catch up, because I'm mental and I did this last week as soon as you mentioned character creation. Is a character with an awful lot of life cards going to be a detriment to me?
Potentially, I couldn't see it being too much of a detriment as long as you have cards which you can use to resist trauma. But I'm seeing courage, I'm seeing self-confidence on here. I'm seeing those two. Both of those you can use to resist kind of traumas. So anything with that kind of keyword, anything in that area is good. So yeah, you've got some physical toughness. You've also got a bit of mental toughness there as well, which is always useful in Lovecraft.
Okay.
Mark, have you chosen any yet? You look like you were.
Yeah, looking for the list. Obviously, kind of starting with Labourer. It's got a good selection of cards this path. So for just the physical stuff, I was going to go with Brawn, Endurance, and Giant because that's 3 good life cards you can use for offensive and defensive physical actions. Probably quite a lot into those. For other stuff, I was looking at things like Knockdown and Dirty Fighting. Dirty Fighting is very handy because it means that kind of mundane stuff you find around you automatically gives you an extra d6, which is very handy rather than just a +2. And the Knockdown, it really adds an extra dimension onto a melee cat, and you're not just doing damage, you are putting people down, which costs them potential as well to get back up again.
Yeah. Very useful. Sorry.
So I've had a look at them. From the Drifter, I think things like the Cunning one gives a bit of extra dimension. Sleight of Hand and People and Places, which is that static knowledge card. If it makes sense for someone who's been moved around an awful lot, and it just helps give the character an extra way of getting into plots because he knows stuff rather than just being able to hit things. Off the Deviant one, there's a couple of ones I was after here. I mean, things like Threaten, for example, is always a useful one. It means that gives me a social skill, as it were. And things like Self-Confidence and Life. Sorry, Self-Confidence and Self, I think. Self-Confidence gives it kind of basic defense against some kind of mind effects or any of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Self is it's always a good life card to have because it works pretty well in a lot of situations. So it's quite a mix. That's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 life cards, which is quite a large number. A couple of opportunity type ones, or sorry, they're not down skill, for example. I was thinking of resourceful as well.
Okay. So, yeah. Well, Self is always one of those ones that you hope crops up in one of your paths. It can be used so much. I'm trying to dodge because of myself. But yeah, it sounds like you've got a good spread there. It suits your character quite well. And again, like Jay said, Jay there, you've got some good body life cards, but also some good mental life cards. It's be quite interesting seeing which ones are sacrificed, because normally things like Self or Self-Confidence are the first ones to go.
The size.
Yeah, but when you're thinking, oh, there might be something around the corner which can make me go mad if I don't have the Self-Confidence, it might be Brawn or other ones which go beforehand. Chris, your character is currently named Dr. Question Mark.
Yes, I haven't really thought of a proper name yet. That sort of comes to me later on in the process. I've not quite sort of finalised this. I've noticed I've actually ended up with 5 life cards as well, and I'm not sure I want to go that route because I don't think it quite fits the character. But at the moment I've got Empathy, which comes from the medicine side of things. I've got Memory, which is quite a good one. I've got Seen the Elephant, which is very useful in to horrific situations, so that one's going to be a good one to resisting the horror. And I've got Swift and Manual Dexterity, which both come from my Stage Magician. And my thinking was about that is that they're actually half-decent combat skills. And so, while I'm definitely not going to be any sort of front-rank fighter-type character, the ability to have a pistol and to at least get it vaguely on target would be useful in any character. So that having those two. So I'm not sure how I'm going to tweak that, because I think I do want to drop it down to 4 life cards on that.
Would you be taking the gun as a mundane item or as a character item?
No, I'm planning to take a character item. I'm planning to take 2 character items. One is being medical supplies, and the other one being a revolver.
That's very good. I should explain. In the 66 system, we have a system where your character sheet, your character's abilities can include items which they are particularly good with, which are referred to as character items. Chris, as he said, has chosen a gun and some medical supplies for that. It just means that he can use his experience to make those things better, or his points at character creation. So yeah. Okay, I'm actually going to ask now, because we've got 3 very dissolute and separate characters here. Where do your characters know each other from? So if we can come up with a kind of background. I know we haven't got a massive amount of time left, but we can have a bit of a discuss over this and see what we're doing. So does anyone have any ideas? Or
Well, yeah, that's an interesting one, because we've got the Stage Magician, the journalist reporter, and Mark, yours was a hobo. You said you'd strapped on some knowledge skills.
Well, he was
just people and places, really. So he knows the way he's been. He knows people there. So someone who relies on reputation for getting work and knowing people to get favours and what he needs, then that kind of makes sense. He doesn't know a lot about, for example, anything to do with the Outer Dark, or sorry, not the Outer Dark, Cthulhuid monsters or anything like that.
Yeah, I could easily imagine that Mart's character could have been hired by Chris's as a stagehand.
Yeah, so he
Or
knows,
a-
he doesn't
a
know him,
Mart in the audience, perhaps.
because Chris's Chris's character's actual profession wasn't a stage magician. His profession was a doctor. And that is right, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, yes, but I was thinking that I'm going to be a reasonable, upstanding member of society, and being a doctor, I get to meet lots of people. So actually, in terms of sort of nexus for bringing just odd people together, I'm not a bad one. So the way for meeting any of these characters is that I can be their doctor. The other thing is, as a member of society, the social situation, community, I might have hired Mark's character to do some manual labour, to come and work in the house, or recommended him to a friend or whatever else. So that's quite easy to bring in on that side, I think.
In terms of what for mine, if we don't have a detective character for mine to hang off on, a way I could have interacted, certainly with Chris's character, is it was quite common for junior journalists who weren't rated or basically were underfoot to be sent off to do what we would call now puff pieces. It's like small little bits to camera if you're a TV journalist, or just small bits of copy that you can drop into any newspaper or any date just to fill out space if you need to wrap around to advertise otherwise. I can easily imagine my character having been sent to interview yours, Chris.
Yeah, it's probably, I don't know whether they did charity fundraising or stuff like that, but my doctor going to the hospital ward for sick children and having a journalist tag along while I do little magic tricks for the kids. It's a perfect local newspaper, nonsense piece, isn't it?
Very much. Where are we in the world, Pat?
It's Arkham County. It's very much the kind of Lovecraft locales.
Yeah, Arkham County is near New York?
Yes, Massachusetts.
Right, okay, so we're near a reasonably large city. So yeah, I could imagine that would be a way that our characters do know each other. I don't think it's very likely that Mark's character and my character... I mean, it's the kind of people we would pass each other in the street, but not necessarily ever make a connection.
I don't know. Pat,
Sorry.
yeah, I was going to say, Pat, I mean, the way to phrase it, I mean, what I found is a very good technique in these circumstances is to give the players the starting point to the adventure. It says, tell them, you're going to be starting in this office, you all need to be there for a reason and have an interest in X or whatever, and then just let the players work it out, because at the moment we don't know where we should be or what sort of relationship we should have.
In that case, I should tell you then, my intention was, when Jay said that he was playing a journalist earlier this week, was that a lot of it will be driven by that, because it's a very easy way to get people involved in thingy. So the core of the adventure would be Jay's characters trying to find newsworthy things, probably sometimes going to more risks than other journalists would, because obviously she has more to prove. So I guess the first adventure would probably start based around Jay's character, or potentially at the hospital, because the first one I'm going to be investigating is based on the kind of stuff I was writing about using 1920s medicine and 1920s medical things. Yeah. So having her interview you is quite a good way, first of all, to introduce the characters to each other, to get that going and be fine. It is true, Mark, that ordinarily kind of your characters might not interact, but you've got to remember it is the 1920s. Drifters could be hired as orderlies or lower level kind of staff, exactly, hospital porters, things like that.
Okay.
I think that works out very well. All in
Yeah,
all.
a neat way you could tie an awful lot of characters together. I mean, in particular, in a hospital, is you have a curious corpse in the morgue, and that brings in rapidly an awful lot of people because Chris's character is the attending physician. My
Yeah.
character is either already doing a puff piece on his day, or is just interested in reports of curious corpses. Mark's character could be a morgue attendant or the guy who found him.
Have you been looking at my notes? Um,
I just, it's a good plot starting point that occurred to me. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a good set of characters there. We've got a good kind of level of relationship. So the characters don't really know each other first off. We'll be starting from that perspective, which means we get to introduce people to each other as well as introducing the game. Yeah.
Out of interest, Pat, did everyone go over their skills, or was it just the life cards we looked at?
I think we went over the life cards. I know Chris hadn't finished all his skills by the time I went over there, but if you feel that you haven't had your piece.
Yeah. I've had in terms of life cut, their skills, pretty much all of mine come off the journalist one, because the student and activist didn't quite fit. But here's a good discussion for you, Pat. I've taken search twice.
Okay, I've always been of the opinion that that's okay as long as two of your path cards have it. I know some people don't like to run this game like that, but I just think it's.
Well, I figured it would be a very useful thing to have to be able to, because it's one of the things that 66 does have an odd aspect of, in that people very rarely have advantages they can use for looking at things, spotting things, perception checks, or searching.
I think Chris might be looking up a rule. Are you? Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it's worth actually going back to the rules because I need to remind myself exactly what I wrote on this because what's in my head and what was written down on the page can often be different.
It would be bad of us to flagrantly break a rule in our playtests. That wouldn't be good playtesting. I'll just hand wave that. Okay, well, while Chris is just looking that up, if we go to Mark, he can explain his skills and what he's chosen.
Yeah, sure. Hang on, I'm muted. No, I'm not muted. Lovely. Yeah. So skills I picked here. So we've got the list. Taking things like knockdown, for example, adds a bit of depth to a fighting character. It means you can do more damage just beyond physical damage. I was looking at the block opportunity card as well. It means you can just kind of, as a tough guy, particularly as only one tough guy amongst two talking characters, being able to kind of block the movement of people around you to help protect your companions is pretty good. I've got a lot of my pretty much all my life cards come off my labour, and a lot of my skills have come off my drifter. So knowledge of people and places, mentioned that before. Sleight of hand, I don't think it's entirely unreasonable that he wouldn't have stolen something, so I'm quite happy to have that on there. And then I put quite a lot of points into dirty fighting, so just kind of, it's part of that resourcefulness thing. But when I was looking at the skills, a question came up. In the labourer path, you got both dirty fighting and resourceful, which appear to do something very, very similar.
I will. I'll make a note of that. I'll have a look at it. Thank you very much. So, labourer path, similar cards.
Yeah, because both of them means you can use an ad hoc weapon as a 1d6 dice value. I think they're both good ideas, but really changing what the dirty fighting does to make it a bit more general.
Both of those are generic cards. I'll have to have a look.
Yeah, you might be interested in. There's a street violence advantage, which I think is of a gang life path in the 66 modern setting, but it's just a general thuggishness violence advantage. So that one's quite useful for a general combat character.
There are some slight differences here because it's resourceful is just any mundane equipment used ad hoc, whereas dirty fighting is specifically weapons. But I don't. There's nothing on resourceful that says it can't be used for weapons. So yeah, you are right. You might maybe be able to get basically free 2d6 plus 2 out of that. So sorry, 2d6. plus 0. So yeah, I'll have a look. I'll see if there's anything better, and I'll have a look at those streamlines. Chris, your skills, or what was that rule in the end? What came up?
Right, yes, I actually found the rule for reference. It's on page 71. Duplicate advantages. Each advantage on a path may only be purchased once, but a character is allowed to have identical advantages if they come from 2 or more different paths. Advantages which have specify after their name need a focus, e.g. when selecting weapon expertise, specify the player must record the type of weapon, so weapon expertise pistols. These advantages may be selected multiple times from the same path as long as they have a different focus. No two advantages from the same path may be identical. So in answer to Jay's question is, by the rules, no, you're not allowed to take search twice, assuming you get it on one path.
Were they from 2 different paths then, Jay? Or?
They are from 2 different paths, yes.
Oh.
Then they should be that. Yeah.
That's legal. The way to justify it, I mean, the way I'd sort of want the player to justify it is to give me some idea of why they're slightly different. So if they're taking brawn from 2 paths, you'd assume they're different types of physical training. There's lots of upper body strength and then lots of leg stuff. So you can justify 2 different brawns. Maybe search, one you're good at searching documents, that paperwork sort of thing, and one is a more rummaging, a traditional search.
Yeah, perhaps. We'll see. I basically ran the odds in my head and went, well, I could put 8 points into search, or I could have 2d6 search.
Yeah, it is a bit. It's a bit of an exploit, as it were.
Yeah, it works well if you have spare potential. Then you are better off. Though, yeah, once you get up to sort of like the 10 points of 1d6 plus 3, the sort of the averages sort of pan out. So yeah, it swings and roundabouts, which is what the 66 system is about.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Sorry.
Well,
Can either Mark or Patrick move slightly, because at the moment you're both leaned into the cameras in the same direction. So you've done that really weird face merge thing, as far as I can tell. On my screen, you both lean towards each other.
I'm seeing mine in widescreen, so I'm not quite sure where the edges are. So I don't know if I'm not a face here. Anyway, so Chris, what skills did you choose?
Yes, skills. Well, I went for medicine because fuck it, I'm a doctor. It seemed a very sensible thing to do, and science. I think that one came off my fringe scientist path, surprisingly enough. I also took social status, which I think is on my doctor's path, because it seemed to me, particularly that era, doctors then generally have social status, and it would be a useful talking skill, social skill for dealing with people. I then took, on a similar line, I took motor mouth, which is on the stage magician path, which is you have the ability to start and dominate a conversation with almost anybody. So that those 2 together seem to me like good ones for, well, a certain type of social interaction at least.
Yeah, I've met a few doctors who could talk.
Yeah, I used to work in medicine, doing computer systems and dealt with lots of doctors, which is why that character, Motor Mouse, exists. The final one I've taken skill-wise is Think Differently, which I think is from Fringe Scientist, because I thought that goes well with being a Fringe Scientist. It will go well with sort of coping with some of the weird shit we're going to encounter, and also might come in handy in terms of sort of like the stage magician and just thinking up new ideas.
Yeah, I think Differently is going to prove to be one of the more useful skills in 66 Lovecraft, because it's thinking differently, you kind of have to in order to survive. But yes, those are all good. A very well-rounded character there. I do like Motormouth. It's a lovely little bit of skill. Yeah. So yeah, so that's everybody's path cards, life cards, and skills chosen. We've discussed Chris's character equipment. No one else chose any character equipment, did we?
Yeah, I picked off a few bits for mine. Aurora's got herself a notebook and pen, camera, and a flashlight, which nothing else could be a heavy item you can smack someone over the head with.
Okay. So are those characters or are they mundane?
They're mundane.
Okay. And Mark, what mundane equipment did you take?
I was going to kind of go without. So in terms of weapons, because if I'm relying on things like the dirty fighting ability, then I don't need to have a weapon to be able to help people. Whatever I've got. But in terms of other kits, I mean, if he's drifting about and carrying his own equipment with him, then I was thinking of stuff like almost like his camping gear or things like that. So he's got, no matter where he ends up, he can always set up somewhere.
Well, I mean, there's no.
If I send him as a mechanical aid, but he can have his tools with him.
I don't think there's any set regulations on what is and what isn't mundane gear. So I'd say a camping set is something you could definitely have as mundane equipment. I like the idea of dirty weapons, though.
Yeah, it's something to do as another variant. If you make him suddenly works like a farm mechanic or something like that as he works around, use the mechanic path rather than labourer, then you give him a set of tools he can use, combine it with the dirty fighting, and then you've got an instant collection of clubs.
Cool. And Chris, did you choose any equipment? Sorry, did you choose any equipment on top of your medical supplies and revolver, or have you just got the character equipment there?
Yeah, I've just given myself a car because I thought, yeah, something you can actually drive around and go places might be useful, generally speaking, for the characters, and I seem to be the most likely character to have that.
Certainly are. Cars, well, as we've put in the book, cars were becoming more common in the 1920s, but they certainly weren't the kind of everyday item that they are these days. So having somebody who has a vehicle that they can drive is probably a very good idea. I was actually thinking about that in terms of if you had household servants or anything like that, could you put them under mundane items, or would you have to stat them out, or
yes. They literally, I believe it's in the rule books, but a companion, whether it be a dog, a manservant, or whatever else, is a piece of equipment from the game's point of view. So it can be character equipment or it can be mundane equipment, and you just use it exactly the same way as any other thing. So you spend potential on it, and if it's not doing anything, if you don't spend any potential, it's just standing around doing nothing really, or nothing effective. So it can be there standing there to your side, shooting at the monsters, but unless you spending potential on it, then it's going to have no dice behind that. And you combine it with your other actions. So if you and your companion are opening fire on this monster, you spend a potential on your weapon skill, potential on your gun, and a potential on your companion, and they all add together to one attack, because it's just both of you working in concert to attack the monster.
Yes.
That's an interesting idea. Mark, you'll know this reference.
Yeah.
The mags from Phantasy Star Online.
You broke up at that particular moment. Say again.
The mags from Phantasy Star Online.
Oh, these little robots that kind of float around over your shoulder and kind of give you little backup skills.
Yeah, that might be something I might want to stick in my sci-fi game, actually. They sound like an interesting idea.
Hmm.
But it's something you could have just as 1d4 plus 2 little thing, and it's either got a small little gun on it or a laser target or something like that. And yeah, for an awful lot of actions, just like, well, I've got this thing. And it almost acts like a mook if you wanted to, as on a separate turn, or it can act as just an extension of you for spending potential on. So, yeah, I might keep that in mind. That could be a whole interesting.
It is, yeah, it's a very cool idea. I think what we're going to do now is everybody's had a good think about the character. We've seen these characters' skills, we've seen their paths. let's find out about actually who these characters are. You know, some of those without names. Let's get them names. Let's get some backstory going. So I think we'll go with Chris first this time because we've kind of been leaving him out for the first jumping in tonight.
Damn, I haven't thought of anything yet. Yeah, so I sort of have him as this quite avuncular character. You know, this whole entertaining kids. You know, it's that sort of thing. But you know, that is just a mask because I think you're absolutely right about he uses this entertainment as a way of coping with some of the unpleasantness of what he encounters. And it's got to be said that 1920s medicine must have been a pretty depressing career because practically everybody you treated died. Because, yeah, let's face it, you know, no antibiotics, you know, any primitive surgery techniques, you know, limited understanding of infection. Most people died. So I think it's that sort of like he's jolly on the outside, but is a little bit sort of dark, you know, inside.
Yeah, I can see that. There's some kind of new show which is about like a medicine in the 20s. It looks quite good. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I will say now, my assumption going forward is that your characters have never really encountered anything of the Lovecraftian stuff beforehand. But if you have a very good character reason for knowing about something like that, then please let me know, and it won't get in the way of anything. But,
well, I've got the Seen the Elephant card, which is, I mean, it just specifies you've seen horrendous stuff or something along those lines, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Inured to horrific situations. Yeah. So I wonder if we could actually, is Arkham on the coast? Isn't it?
Well, it's near the coast, yes. So.
Yeah. I mean, it could be that, you know, I've got that because I've dealt with, you know, a shipwreck or something like that. You know, and a mass casualty event. Yeah.
Russian flu, depending on your character's age, so there's always that.
Yeah, just completely sort of by the by, I heard a really interesting, I can't remember, I heard or watched a program on the recovery of the bodies from the Titanic. You know, like a few days after the Titanic went down, a ship from the local port went out to fetch the bodies, which of course, being it's freezing cold, they weren't decomposing and stuff like that. And they expected to get just a few, and all the bodies were just floating around in pretty much in one patch. You know, there was this patch of sea with hundreds and hundreds of bodies floating in it, and you know, obviously, men, women, and children, and fishing them out, and just what a horrendous experience that had been for what was just effectively a fishing boat doing this. So that sort of thing is, I'm thinking maybe I was involved with something along those lines.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that get you. Just thinking about it, it's a little bit. Moving very swiftly on, Jay. What's your character?
I've got the idea behind my head that she's very much living the classic American dream, the classic manifest destiny. I've got in my head she's probably not much older than 19. She's pretty young. I mean, given the nature of the age she's in, if she was any older, there'd be questions of, well, why aren't you married and settled down now? Whereas she's only at the age of 19, then you can kind of say, well, she's just playing around before she finds a nice man. These are obviously hideous statements, and that of the nature of the era, and not my own personal opinion. So that's I like the idea of she's essentially just this walking ball of enthusiasm. Possibly maybe the youngest daughter and maybe several elder brothers perhaps, which is why she's got the brawn and the courage and the self-confidence, because she just basically had to deal with being the little one of the family, and now she's basically on the lines of, well, actually no, I always had an independent streak, so now I'm going off and doing what I want to do, because the result of your net bullying over all these years is that I don't care for what you think. I care about what I think. So that her backstory is pretty small in the fact that she leaves home and tries to get a heads up in local journalism and activism, and that's essentially all she's done so far. So she's very much kind of an innocent, would be a remit for her and her backstory. She doesn't know how muddy the world can get yet.
That's a very good very kind of solid character there. Apart from the fact that she's female, women, because girls never ever get mentioned in Lovecraft's works, it sort of reminds me of perhaps the protagonists of the festival, or some of the incarnations of Randolph Carter. So yeah, you got a good character there. And Mark, your background as a drifter, I imagine is quite interesting.
Yeah, so trying to run with stuff off the top of my head really here. So reasons why someone ends up in that kind of drifting work rather than being settled down anywhere. So it's not necessarily from this county. I think it's probably reasonable to say that people roamed a long way when they drifted in this kind of lifestyle in this period. So say he was from one of the poor regions further inland, mostly a farming place. Family was very large, a Catholic family, as he was one of the younger children, and essentially got forced out of the home once he became old enough to go out and work because he had to. So he had parents couldn't afford to keep so many children, so he left early to go work and has drifted about. He knows where the family are, still in contact with them, and he sends remittances back to help them out as they do stuff, but he's otherwise drifting about, so he hasn't not been able to find himself any kind of solid employment yet for whatever reason. He could put in some alcoholism maybe in there, but I think that's a little bit cliched.
It's also the age of prohibition, so it might be a bit difficult if you wanted to have yourself as an alcoholic to get your hands on it. I think also sorry.
Must be plenty of moonshine out there.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Just give me a second, because I had been doing a bit of research on.
I was just something to throw in about prohibition is that alcohol was relatively easy to get at, and they were it was so blatant, the ignorance of laws. It's because all you need to make alcohol is basically a fruit sauce and yeast and things like that, and you can buy these tins of grape concentrate, very common at the time, and basically everything you needed for home brew was incredibly easily available and blatantly marketed at people at brewing their own alcohol. Though of course technically it was illegal once you brewed it, so it just goes to show just what a joke the prohibition was, because the laws were just ignored in all but name only.
Well, there was a point when I think some of the government agencies started poisoning booze. I know that happened, so they weren't keen on people ignoring it, but I think people were ignoring it. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. What I was hinting at was the whole stock market crash, but that's actually not until a bit later than our story will be happening. So you've got just a guy who basically fell between the cracks, really, though. Mark?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, he's not kind of fallen in the guts in society so much, but more that he came to a poor area and he wasn't able to find work there to support his family, so he's moved about for it. Could be just sufficiently unskilled, sufficiently thick. He's not actually. No one's been able to really hold him on, or no one's wanted to hold on to him for very long. Hence, he keeps moving about.
That's cool. Okay, so that's everybody's backstory. We know how these characters met. We know what they can do. We have their names. Did you have a name yet, Chris?
Yes, I have a name. I am Dr. Kent Brantley.
Kent Brantley. I like it.
And I didn't make this name up. I just googled for American doctors, and I think this name cropped up. He might be one of those doctors who recently got infected with Ebola. So there you go.
Yeah, I was going to say sometimes when you're just looking for a random job, it's a random name. Yeah, you should just check why the name has popped up. You don't want to wind up being named after somebody who's committed some horrible crime. But yes, it does look. Yeah, So Kent Branley, a very good name. I like that. It's a very good, strong name. Jay, you're Aurora Valentine, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yep. And Mark, what was your character name?
Yeah.
I'm kind of picking through some names here because I'm really terrible just coming up with names off the cuff or trying to invent them.
Jeffrey J. Rook.
I'm going to look for Harry McClintock.
Harry McClintock. I like that. Where did you get that?
He's an American hobo. Harry Kevin McClintock, also known as Haywire Mac, was an American singer and poet, and hobo. Listing on Wikipedia's site here, hobo. There's a list of notable hobos. What's another one? Notables who have hoboed.
Fair enough.
Okay.
I just don't know that hobo.
Yeah,
It's a verb now, to hobo.
To hobo. Hobo.
I mean, not to try
Do you
and
meddle
sound
in hoboing?
being disparaging, but I just the term notable hobo is not one I've heard before.
It's almost an oxymoron. Though no, I'm now thinking of a jazz oboist who's also a hobo.
There was that fellow. None of you live in Derby, do you? But there was a big issue seller who used to sing in the main street, and he got quite famous actually. So there's that. I suppose that it's not.
The famous singing person in Southampton was one of the trolley girls in Waitrose in Southampton. Sings whatever happens to be in her head at the time, even as only the same 3 lines, over and over and over and over. And could be a new song, could be old song, could be anything. She's mental. But they keep her employed, because,
Okay, well, if you're watching, Trolley Girl from Southampton, there was your shout out. Yes. Okay. So So we've got 3 very good, very fully fleshed out characters here. Yeah, I think, to be honest, that's pretty much all we're looking for tonight. We need to test.
The only last little bit of mechanic stuff I've got is I've gone with 1 less static and 2 free resists.
That makes sense. Has anyone else altered their kind of standard build?
No, I'm going for the straight 4 dynamic, 2 static. Though I think it'd be quite interesting to see Jay play a slightly different character to see how that pans out.
Yeah, we don't get it.
Well, the martial artist zombie game worked really well up until I ended up in the dark.
Yeah. And then you ended up as zombie food.
Mm-hmm.
Played a sociopath for a zombie game at Chris ran once. That was brilliant because I just drove away with all the food at the end. Right. Yes. So yeah, I think that's it. Unless anybody has anything particularly they want to add at all.
Nope. I'm done telling questionable stories.
So we're all happy with our characters. Obviously, there may be more players next week when we start the playtests. If there are, of course, we won't be going into this level of detail on their character creation process because we'll be playing the game and we'll be playing the playtests to see what we're doing. So, yeah. As far as this playtest goes, that's everything we've done. We've got 3 very good characters. That's a backstory. We've got some names. Everything's sorted out so that we can get right into the game next week. So I guess we'll see you then.